Hi guys, how's it going? Ivano here, and today we are looking at the top 5 mistakes every new player makes in PvP, and I will give you some quick tips on how to stop making those mistakes. So the first mistake happens even before you join the war zone, and that's not being geared properly. Now, you can be competitive even in green conquest gear if you are very experienced, but especially if you're new to PvP, you want to make sure to have at least a 328 to 330 item rating before jumping in. Maybe even more important is to make sure that you fully augment your gear, since that will add an extra 10 to 20% to your stats, which you will need to give you a fighting chance. If you want to know the fastest way to gear up for PvP, check out my gearing guide, as well as the video I made about augments and everything else you should do before getting into the level 80 war zones. So check out the link in the description below. Mistake number 2, and this is something that not only new but also more experienced players do wrong, is playing too zoomed in. If you're playing in first-person view, you cannot see what's going on around you. So if, let's say, a sorcerer pops his cooldowns and is about to burst you from behind, you won't be able to react to that in time. Or you might miss that the enemy respawn door just opened and you are about to be ganked by 4 players. So instead, make sure to set your camera distance to 100 and then zoom out. You might need to get used to that at first, but trust me, it's going to benefit your gameplay more than you might think. If you want to see more on that, I have a whole settings video, which I will also link in the description. Mistake number 3, and this one is quite common, is bad positioning and movement. So this one can take multiple forms. What is very common is walking into melee range if you're a ranged player. And this, of course, makes it easy for the enemy to engage onto you without even needing to use a gap closer. And it gives the melee player the advantage in the fight. And another positioning mistake that a lot of ranged players make is standing out in the open, too far away from any pillars, which allow the enemy ranged players to free cast on them, or even worse, the enemy PowerTechs to pull them into melee range and blow them up. So don't do that. Instead, stay at range and hit whatever is closest to you if you're a ranged player, and stay close to a pillar, box, or similar line of sight object. For melee players, the most common positioning mistake is overextending. That simply means running out of range of your healers or tanks. Usually this happens when melee players tunnel vision on killing some low HP enemy, and then they run around the corner before getting stunned and bursted down by 2 assassins. So instead of overextending, dying, and then flaming your healers afterwards, what you should do is just hit whatever targets you can in your range, especially if they are trying to kill your healer. You can also put your heal in focus target, so you will have an easy time seeing them, and you can make sure to stay in their range to keep them alive so that they can keep you alive as well. And then when it comes to movement, the mistake that most new players make is backpedaling. This is bad simply because it is slower than just turning around your character with a mouse and moving forward. Or you can use a jump turn or even strafing. All of those will allow you to move your character to a better position while still doing damage to your opponents. If you want to learn how to properly move your character and how to position in a war zone, check out the videos I made on those topics in my Introduction to PvP series. Links to those are of course also in the description below. The 4th mistake that newer players make all the time is not using all their abilities. If a PowerTech is about to burst you with explosive fuel, double energy burst, and shoulder cannon, you are not going to survive that one-on-one unless you use a powerful defensive cooldown. But especially newer players tend to get overwhelmed by everything that's going on in PvP and simply forget to use their abilities. So if you're new to PvP and you're not sure when is the perfect time to use a defensive cooldown, maybe you're worried about wasting it, just remember that the player that uses all their cooldowns at random times will typically win versus a player that does not use their cooldowns at all. So don't be afraid to waste them. Usually, if you use them one at a time, that is fine. You typically don't want to press all your buttons at the same time, because then once they are down, you don't have any left. But if you see red numbers and that PowerTech is starting to hit you, use an energy shield. Use force speed, kite away, and if you get stunned and you see your HP dropping, use phase walk. And of course the same is true for offensive abilities. Don't be shy to use recklessness, polarity shift, or explosive fuel. It's better to use them suboptimally than to not use them at all. And the final and fifth mistake, which I see new players making all the time, is picking bad targets. Now this one can also come in multiple ways, such as targeting a tank instead of a DPS, but a more common error is picking a main target and then sticking to them, dueling them, trying to kill them so hard, even though the target maybe just used a damage reduction cooldown, which means you are basically losing 25% of your damage potential. So instead, switch targets faster, but especially don't keep hitting into immunities or reflect, because you might be healing a mercenary that just used responsive safeguards, or even worse, you might be killing yourself on an operative's evasion reflect. If you want to learn more about target selection, I also have a guide on that, so check out the link in the description below. That's it for today, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed this quick guide and maybe learned a thing or two. If you did, please remember to leave a like on this video, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.